Hello there, I'm Scotty, and you're not. I don't know what that was. Gibberish. We're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. Now, when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, never played the board game, but I did grow up with this here cartoon series. In fact, I remember being disappointed because when that movie came out, the movie came out, it was on the Sci-Fi Channel back in the early 2000s, whatever, the 2000s, whatever. And it wasn't anything like the show. And I'm like, well, this is not like the show. And then, as I grew up, I realized it was a role-playing game, and that's what it was based off of, And then they came out with this 23 years after the original one in 2000. It has nothing to do with it. It is a reboot, but yeah. Stars Chris Pine. Oh, I'm blanking on her name. Michelle Rodriguez, Sophia Lillis, Justice Smith, Renee Jen Page, I hope I pronounced that right, and Hugh Grant. And it tells the story of Ed, a thief he was a harper who became a thief under some strange circumstances, and he and his sidekick Holga escape a prison in hopes of getting his daughter back, but some things don't go the way they want it to, and they end up having to mount a mission to save his daughter, and then eventually have to save this whole kingdom. Yeah, it's the thing. So I do have some issues with this movie. Mainly, I think some of the comedy in this is just a little too much. Like, there's a few times in this movie where you'll have something, yes, I've done something, or we're doing something great, and then followed up by a joke. Like, for instance, there's a scene during the final fight where Chris Pine's character, Ed, he uses a rope on this, with a tapestry or something, on this dragon they're fighting, and it's like, yes, he did it, and then he looks down, it's like, yes, this is the perfect way, cut to something else. Instead, they have him pan down to see that there's rope around his legs, and he gets pulled away. That was fine. You didn't need to have the joke after that. And also, another one is earlier in the film, they have earlier before this, when they try to sneak in, they do this thing where Justice Smith's character is using magic to create a fake Chris Pine to sing a song. And there's equal parts funny and not funny. It's funny when he has a meltdown and he starts to melt in, you've seen like the 2K wrestling games. There's the whole thing where the referee will just out of nowhere, like spaghetti and melt. I've seen it in playing things. It happened to me once. That's what he starts to do. He just starts to melt, and it's like, oh, what the? Huh? And it's funny. That part is funny. But then, they could have cut it there. Yes, we have to explain, but not really. Because they cut back to them sneaking, and it's because Justice Smith got his foot stuck in a hole. And that's why it's doing that. You didn't really need to show that. It messes up, but they get away. Because he's not a very good magician, you see. I mean, he's learning, but he hasn't learned yet. And also, there's a whole gag in the middle of the film where they're trying to find this helmet, right? So they have to talk. He can talk to people that die. Justice Smith can't. So he's going and he's talking to all these dead bodies. Problem is, they could have just talked to one dead person and say, oh, it's with this guy, right? It's with this Thane guy, and that's where I have to go. But instead, they decide they have to pad out the runtime with a joke where they have to go with one guy and he died in the middle of a battle, so they go to another guy who found it out. And he says, you gotta go to this guy. And when they find that guy, they put in a joke where he died while getting out of a bathtub and slipping in his head. And then they have to go find someone else. And they go through many, many, many bodies. When they could have just said, go to one person, have him tell them where the helmet is, and that's it. And then they even have this joke where they leave one of the dead bodies still living. They didn't put him back to dead. And then there's a post-credit where the guy's still there alive. Now, that would have been funny if you took out all the jokes of them waking up all the people and just had the one person, and they were in a hurry and didn't put him back to dead. That would have been funny. To me, it just pads out the runtime. This thing is 2 hours, and it doesn't need to be. You know, I talked about John Wick Chapter 4 earlier this morning, and I said that that movie is way too long. Sometimes the thing justifies, but this feels like they put jokes in just to extend it. Like, there's a whole thing where they go to meet this guy, right? This guy, Renee Jim Page's character. I don't know his name. I'm going to call him the Paladin. The Paladin, right? And all it does is pad the runtime to go get this helmet. Just for them to say, oh, Justice Smith's the only one that can use it, and he doesn't know his powers. And so they spend wasting more time on him trying to attune to it, but he can't do it until he finally stands up to what turns out to be himself. Sort of thing later in the film. And then, another thing that really starting to get to me, I guess, is they're building, they're going to steal all this treasure from the guy, right? And the Paladin's like, well, you can't keep it. If I'm helping you steal treasure, you can't keep it. You have to spread it because I'm a good person, right? And by the way, they meet this guy, and he helps them do this, and he just fucks off. He just walks off in a straight line over a rock. And again, they have a joke here where he's walking, and we just have a static shot of him walking, and commentary from Chris Pine going, oh, he's just going to walk in a straight line. He's going to walk in a straight line. Oh, there's a rock. What are you going to do? Oh, he's going to climb over it. Okay. He's just going to keep going. I was like, why was that needed? That, to me, that's not funny. That's just holding on a shot to extend the runtime. That's what it feels like to me. Like, and then I'm just pointing on all the negatives, you know. And, speaking of jokes, right, we'll go back to the beginning of the film, where Ed and Holga are in a prison, and they have this meeting to, basically, it's a parole hearing, basically. And they're talking about this guy named Jonathan. They say that he's on the council, he can get us out, but he's not there. He's late because of the storm. And this whole thing goes, Jonathan would understand, Jonathan would understand. He basically tells the backstory of everything we need to know up to this point. So basically, the film starts in mid-res, and then we get the whole backstory of these characters, which I'll get into in a little bit. And then we're here. And the whole thing with this Jonathan character, he's a bird guy. He walks in, and they grab onto him, they blow out the window, and they escape. And that would have been fine. But during this, they do a joke that I thought was kind of funny the first time, but really thinking about it this time, because this is the second time I watched this movie. Because DeGroby brought over his copy, and I bought my own. So I watched this on Paramount Plus, though, because I didn't want to put the DVD in at this moment. But, you know, if anybody asking, well, if you're just going to watch it on a streaming service, yeah, that's one thing. Also, I watched John Wick Chapter 4 and Renfield on Vudu. But here's the thing. I think, one, I'm a stickler for physical media. I know stuff's on digital stuff, and I'll watch that. But, like, what happens, streaming services, they take stuff off all the time. So Paramount Plus decides we're not going to have this anymore. I have the DVD. Or if I want to show this to my son, you know, I can show him this, that sort of thing. You know, which is why I bought the DVD. If you're wondering, well, I had a DVD because, well, Paramount decided they weren't going to do a combo pack and just have the DVD by itself and the Blu-ray by itself. So, yeah. But anyway, back to this joke. Because it would have been fine if they just escaped. use the guy to escape, whatever. But during this, the joke that they use is, but we were going to grant your pardon. And then I'm sitting here watching this time, and I'm thinking, no, wait a minute, that's just stupid. Like, if they were going to grant their pardon, why do we need a funny joke escape thing? Why not just say, okay, we grant your pardon and have them leave? We don't need a grant escape if they were already going to let them leave. It's a little bit confusing to me, you know? And so eventually, we get the backstory of Ed. He was a harper. He had a wife and a daughter. But then there was an incident in which his wife died, and so he had to take care of his daughter on his own. He became an alcoholic. He's been drinking. And then Holga came along and helped him take care of the daughter. But as they got older, as she got older, they realized that, they don't have jobs or anything. So, because he denounced the Harpers. So they became thieves. Eventually, they brought in Justice Smith's character, Simon, and Hugh Grant's character, Forge. And as soon as I saw Hugh Grant, I'm thinking, okay, I just saw this. And I went, okay, so Hugh Grant's the bad guy? He's just what I'm thinking. And there's a moment during the backstory just showing how they got caught. And there's like a time spell because they met this sorceress named Sophina, who is the actual villain of this film, the big bad of this film. She's a red wizard, and she's trying to take over this kingdom for this evil wizard guy. Anyway, while stealing this thing that has the power, this tablet, I'm going to use this remote. This tablet that has the power to bring his wife back from the dead. You only use it once, though. Sophina uses a time stop, because the whole thing he says is that he doesn't hurt anyone. And Sophina hurts someone. He says, we don't hurt people. And then she uses the time stop and freezes him and Holga, and they get caught. And so now that they're free, they go to talk to Forge, who's now running this kingdom, and he's bringing back the High Sun Games, which is something that was banned because they were too barbaric. And seeing what they actually are at the end of the film, I agree. That is just terrible. There's studded with Dungeons and Dragons stuff like a gelatinous cube, some weapons, sort of thing. But yeah. And so this was kind of confusing the first time I watched it, but I kind of understand it more this time. They show up at the kingdom, and because they go back to his house and they're not there, so they find that he's at the kingdom because they leave a note. They go there, and he reunites with Kira, and he learns that Forge was lying to her, saying that they took off because of the treasure was more important or something. He was lying to her, and then they get kicked out and they leave. And I'm like, why are they walking away? The first time I watched it, I'm thinking, what? He went there to get his daughter, now he's just leaving? He reunites with Simon. They reunite with Simon, and then they bring in Doric, who is a druid. She can change shapeshifter, basically. It's Sophia Lillis, by the way. And I remember the first time I watched it, I'm like, hey, he's the girl from It. Red hair. I know she's way younger than me, but I don't like the short hair. Like, maybe what she had I don't know. Her short hair is just weird. I never liked women with short hair. My ex, one time, my son's mom, we were together, and she cut her hair like mid here, but sometimes she would cut it shorter, and it's just like, I don't know, like, I mean, I get it. You want to cut your hair. To me, it's just not for me. Like, Sinead O'Connor and I would never date. Also, she's old enough to be my mother, but but anyway, yeah, so they put these team together, and then because they're going to mount an escape, they're going to steal the treasure, and then they got to get this helmet and everything. When you finally get to the treasure, there's another thing that, like I said, the first time I watched that, I was fine with it. But this time, really thinking about it. Sometimes when you watch a movie a second time, you rewatch a scene and you think, wait a minute, that's not I thought, so this whole thing is trying to get into this room. They use this spell in like you can jump from place to place. It's like not a teleportation spell, but it's like an instant, like a portal. That's what it is. It's a portal spell. I'm sorry, I'm not good at speaking words right now. It's a portal spell, and they use that. They're going to use that to get into the treasure room. They put it on the back of a mirror or something, or a painting or something, and they put it face down in there, so it just leads to the floor. So she is chiseling at it, so they get small enough she can turn into a worm and go inside. And meanwhile, Simon is also trying to attune. We get their fight scenes while they're trying to sneak in, and like I said, the whole melting Chris Pine thing. And then they get in there, and eventually Simon is able to attune. He takes out the guards, and he's able to open the thing and go into the vault with Holga, and it's empty. But when Doric, what would you call it, Dora? I mean, it's owned by Nickelodeon, Paramount Pictures. Not Nickelodeon's connected. It's not a Nickelodeon movie. Anyway, Doric, she turns to a woman. She gets in there, and she's where the treasure is, but it's underneath the Colosseum. And so he's like, what? And turns out that Forge has actually moved all the treasure. Probably used a spell. Sophina probably used a spell to move it underneath the thing so they can put it on a ship and he can get out of there. And it's starting to realize there's something else going on here. But Ed finally reaches who he believes to be Kira, his daughter. By the way, the little girl that plays Kira, I think she's pretty good for what role she has. She was in that My Spy movie with Batista. And also, I recognize her as the little girl from the McDonald's commercial who, like, it's one of those things where she won't smile, and then she gets Happy Meal and she smiles and she's missing a tooth. I believe it's the same girl. Correct me if I'm wrong. You know, some big celebrities have come from doing commercials, so this could have been her beginnings. Who knows? Yeah. So, but it turns out that it's not Kira. He gives out his heart and soul, a whole speech. Turns out to be Sophina. It's okay. This is one of the two things I figured out, or three things that I saw coming. I'm like, in the middle of this, he's like, just telling it from his heart, and I went, that's Sophina, isn't it? And Groby just looked at me. And yeah, it was. She starts laughing, and it's her. The other two I'll get to. But he gets caught, and he convinces Forge to put him and the others in the games. And this is where during the games, we get a reference to the Dungeons and Dragons TV series. They have all the characters are there, which also makes me think, why couldn't we just have that movie? If they were to do a sequel, I know that Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis said if they do a sequel, they want to continue with these characters. But I want to get a movie where we see the events, like we see these characters fighting through the events of this film concurrently, leading up to the games, and you can kind of come back to stuff from this one and showing what happened to them, because we don't really know what happened to them. I don't think they died. So, but I kind of want that. Although, if you're going with that, there is another villain. Like the guy had a one thingy on his head or something. Dragon. Where's the dungeon master? By the way, there is no dungeon master in this. I thought that Forge was going to be the dungeon master, but he's not. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, they fight in the games. They eventually use the gelatinous cube, which doesn't melt them. And by the way, something I'm confused about. Groby tried to explain it to me, and I just couldn't get it, I guess. But Doric gets her arm stuck in the gelatinous cube, and when Holga pulls it out, the anti-magic cuff that she has on comes off. But they all jump inside, and when Simon is pulled out, his cuff is still on. And I'm thinking, well, if it worked for her, why didn't it work for him? And Groby tried to explain, like, um, because his whole body was in there and it was just her arm, and that's why it was different. I don't know. It's confusing to me. But yeah, eventually they get out. They get to the ship with the stuff. They beat up because she gets her powers back. She's able to transform again, and he's able to get his off. And yeah, so they get on the ship. They're sailing away. They basically they convince Kira that Forge is lying. And of course, Forge doesn't help things on his end by putting a blade to her neck, but they're able to have the ending to a joke with Holga, where she likes potatoes, so she throws a potato at his head. That's the conclusion to that whole running joke, is that she loves potatoes, so she throws a potato at his head. And it was kind of fun. But as they're sailing away, they realize that Sophina is doing something. They're gonna, for this evil red wizard guy, so they have to go back. And I love Chris Pine. He's like, well, shit. And to turn the thing around. And then, they sail away back to the place. And he's like, oh, I guess I'm gonna keep my promise to the paladin. And so they use the portal thing to sprinkle the treasure just a little bit towards the outside, and everybody runs outside, so it saves the people from being OD'd or something to death. I don't know. It looks like the foaming in the mouth of people that get attacked with it. And he's like, Forge eventually gets back to his ship because it crashes in front of him, and he realizes all the treasure is gone now. Then they have the final battle. And the final battle was pretty good. Except for when he gets synced off that, then, But, yeah, it comes down to this big fight. But then she uses a time stop again. Now, something before this is that there is this pendant that Kira has that makes her invisible. Before the fight, he says, put on your pendant. She does. She turns invincible. So, this was calling it number 2. And they're frozen, and it looks like she's won, and I went, Kira, right? And he just looked at me, and I went, it's Kira. And yeah, turns out that Simon got better, as he said. I got better, because he was able to negate that, and they just pretended to be frozen, and then Kira snuck up, put the anti-magic cuff on her, which for some reason works on her. She's a red wizard. I don't know. It works. But during the fight, Holga gets stabbed like under here, under her boobie, right? Just under the tit. She's like, oh, that's not a good place, is it? And this is when I'm like, I saw this. I didn't even have to hint that she's dying. I just saw this and I went, they're going to use the thing on her, aren't they? And he just kind of looked at me and smiled. Yeah, sure enough, because they do flashbacks, because he wants to bring his wife back. He wants to be a family, She dies, and then Kira starts crying, and we get these flashbacks revealing that Holga was more of a mother to her than her own mother, because her mother died when she was still a baby. So to her, she was more of a mother. So he uses it to bring her back. And I love her line. She's like, you didn't waste it on me, did you? Or something like that. And I don't remember what it was that she says, but I remember... I remember what it was, because we were watching the first time, and she says that line, I went, it's not a waste when it's for family. And Grovy's like, that would be funny as hell if he just walked in the Coliseum and was like, not a waste if it's for family. But different. That's Universal, this is Paramount. But yeah, and so they're going to live happily ever after as a family. He's like, I have my people, And Doric and Simon, you dated like once, and they're going to try again, I guess. But, yeah, and we end with, honestly, you could have ended it here, and that would have been perfectly fine. But no. We had to cut to the Paladin finding Forge and then cutting back to the prison where he tries to escape the same way they did, but they got rid of the windows. Yeah, could have just cut it off at the happy ending, you know? Or you could have cut it off with Paladin finding him, although that would be a little bit. Just cut it off at the happy ending. And then, of course, like I said, post credit is showing that dead guy that went back to life is still alive. So, what do reanimated corpses eat? Don't say brains. That's only in the Return of the Living Dead and whoever tried to mock them. But yeah, I'm gonna say this is pretty good. I enjoyed it. I do have a few issues, but it's still enjoyable to watch for me. I have a good time with it. I just realized that was all messed up. I have a good time with it. Yeah, big complaint though is that Paladin here, he's on the cover. He's only maybe a half hour of the film. And he's presented as he's one of the big main characters. He's not, really. He's not. Even Forge has maybe the same string time combined, maybe a little bit more. But he's the villain, so that kind of works. Safina's not even on here, to be honest. I don't know. But, yeah. So what are your thoughts on Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves? Leave no comments below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I've been Scotty, and I got one more movie from 2023 left to do, and I can move on to something else. What? I don't know, but something else. Anyway, thank you for watching. I've been Scotty, and I'll see you in the next one.